thank you all for being here and supporting Rainbow. She changed my life last year because I read all of her books in quick succession. Eleanor Park, Fangirl, Attachments. I was lucky enough to get an advance copy of her new book, Landline, which is coming out this summer. Sorry, I know, that was bragging. That was not nice of me. I'm sorry. And it is obviously beautiful because Rainbow only writes beautifully. So I'm not going to waste any more of your time. You came here to see someone. Her name is Rainbow Rowell. Please say hello to Rainbow. Okay. Rainbow, about just a little over a year ago, your life was not like this.
No, in fact. Sometimes I would go to the library and no one would come at all.
In fact, even though you wrote a book in 2011 called Attachments, which was very well received, and it's a beautiful book.
Thank you.
It really was Eleanor Park that took you to the next level.
Yeah.
So beyond the fact that people show up now to see you.
Which is nice, thank you.
How else has your life changed?
Well, I think my life has changed, and that before I could sort of pretend that no one was hearing me as I was writing, you know, I had been a newspaper columnist, and when I knew that my column was going out and that people were reading it, but when I first started writing novels, it was the thing I did for myself, and I didn't think about, like, when I was writing Attachments in Eleanor Park and even Fangirl, I was not thinking that anyone would read it, and so it's a big change in my life to meet people or to talk to people because I'm online. You know, I talk to people every day who have read my book and who sometimes know the book better than I do. I mean, often people will say, chapter 72, and I'll be like, does that book have 72 chapters? Tell me what happened, I don't know. So it's different. I mean, it's this feeling of sharing those characters, especially with Eleanor Park. I definitely have a feeling that Eleanor Park belong to readers maybe more than they belong to me because they just have lives of their own with their readers. It just feels like they don't belong just to me.
I was one of those fangirls who came up to you and started quoting your words at your face. If you recall.
I really loved it.
It happened in the fall.
Yes.
And then I cried a little bit, maybe. No, I don't cry, but I got choked up.
Yes, as did I.
Because, as you said, Eleanor Park is just one of those novels, and I think most of us here would agree, that just touched each of us individually, but also universally. It's like we're all in a community here, right? An Eleanor Park community. Yes. Like we should all hold hands.
Really, we should really hold hands like Eleanor Park hold hands. Full frontal hand holding.
So I'm going to get right into Eleanor Park.
Okay, let's do it.
This is what people are expecting.
Let's do it. We're going to talk about Eleanor Park.
Let me start with the question, or maybe the second most wondered question, because there is a question that I'm going to leave to you guys to ask. I want to talk about whether or not there's a sequel.
There is an Eleanor Park sequel that lives in my head, and I basically plotted it as 2 books originally. So when I sat down to write that book, I thought of them their whole lives, and and for me, where the first book ended was just where that chapter ended, and I was ready to write book 2 immediately, and my agent stopped me and said, your career basically doesn't exist right now. You can't write a sequel to a book that I haven't even sold yet. Like that's like writing your own fan fiction. Because I would email him a lot from parking lots. I'd have this brainstorm like, I know what Park does for a living, or there's going to be a scene where this happens. And he was like, easy, let me sell this book and let's see if anybody wants it. He's like, I don't really want to go to publishers and say, and she's writing the sequel, they're going to think you're crazy. So that is his fault, because now I know exactly what happens to them, but I'm completely petrified to write that book. I feel like people have expectations, and I think a lot of people have a very clear idea in their head what happens to Eleanor Park. And I don't want to write Eleanor Park 2, which my 6-year-old said I should call Park and Eleanor. He said it's the same words, but different. And then he said, and they won't be wearing headphones, they'll be joined together by sewing needles. And I was like, what are they sewing? Maybe a scarf. Like, good. He's like, they could sew their names. Park and Eleanor. Yeah, so I'm scared to write that book because I keep thinking back to like the Star Wars prequels and how badly I wanted them, right? I think back to how badly I want them, and then like, what if people read my sequel and they're like, thank you, Jar Jar Binks? So, but I would like to write about them as adults. The story that I have for them picks up when they're in their like early 30s.
Good so far, guys?
Okay, yeah.
Good?
Good
Okay.
questions.
So the thing, I guess, then, that you'll write before Park and Eleanor
Park and Eleanor, book 2.
is...
I've got a, how do you feel about this subhead? Love will tear us apart again. Right?
No.
Okay.
I'll tell you that right now.
No. How about happily ever after?
So it sounds like then you'll be writing and finishing the screenplay
Yes.
to the Eleanor and Park
sure.
film before Park and Eleanor
For sure.
book two.
Yes, correct, for sure. Yeah.
So have you started writing the screenplay yet?
No, I have not.
Okay.
I am writing another book now, another YA book. And the deal is I have to finish that book before I can do anything else. So my plan is to hopefully finish the first draft of that book like in the next month or two. And then my book Landline comes out, and I'll tour for that. And then I have to write the screenplay. But they have DreamWorks and my agent have supplied me with screenplays to read.
Yes.
I feel like I tricked them because I said, sure, you can have my book, but why don't you let me try to write the screenplay? And they said, sure. And I thought, I've never done this before. You're not running a very responsible operation. You're hiring me. Who are you going to hire to direct it? My brother? Like, it just felt, but anyway, they're giving me a chance. I will do my best. And if I don't do a good job, they'll just hire somebody else. They will hire someone else to write it, the second draft.
So you're writing the screenplay, but to get into sort of the details of
Yes.
the deal, if you can, do
Sure.
you have creative control? Because I have a lot of emails from people who are worried about the casting.
Yeah.
There is a tendency in Hollywood to prettify
I'm thinking like
things
Zac Efron as
Yes.
Park.
Okay. Right. That's the worry.
That's the fear,
worry.
yeah.
How much creative control do you have?
I don't have creative control, and getting creative control on a movie is impossible. But I will say that the conversation with DreamWorks and I went on for months. I mean, it wasn't like they called and I said, yeah. They called and I was like, oh, I don't know. Do you want one of my other books? How do you feel about attachments? Because I don't feel like you could ruin that. I feel like Eleanor and Park, I mean, if you have children, I think that you love all your kids the same, but there maybe are certain kids that you worry about a little bit more. You think that they need a little bit more protection and guidance as they go out into the world. And Eleanor and Park is definitely that book for me. I feel like if you changed just a few things about it, it would really undermine what it is. So the conversation that I had over and over again, really, I mean, they probably think that I'm I'm a doll, you just pull it, and then it says, I'm really worried about the casting. Eleanor can't be skinny. She can't be skinny. She doesn't have to be, she doesn't have to weigh a certain amount or be a certain size, but she absolutely cannot be skinny. And Park has to be Korean, So this is how I feel, and I've said this over and over. And they've always said, of course, of course, of course. They say, why would we make this movie and change it? Like, why would we want this book if we were just planning on changing it? That's the story. Why would we do that? And I'm like, because you're Hollywood. You have done terrible things. Have you watched movies? They're awful. So, I mean, all I could do, and then it kind of got to a point where I have an agent, and she said, these people love this book, and they love this book like readers. So the person at DreamWorks who is interested in it, and the producer who wants it, when they talk to me about the book, it's like when you talk to me about the book. They love it. They love the characters. She said, so my agent said, if this is ever going to be a movie, you don't need to, I think, Rainbow, what you need to decide is, do I want an Eleanor and Park movie? Because that's the decision. It's not DreamWorks versus, it's like, are you prepared for this to be a movie? Because it's going to be different, and it's going to change, and it's not going to be exactly what you wrote. And I thought about it, and I kept thinking about seeing a chubby, red-haired girl and a Korean guy on the big screen as the stars. And not like as the stars we're supposed to feel sorry for, but as the romantic leads in a movie, and seeing those people at the heart of a movie. And I felt like, yes, I want that. I want that. And I'm just going to have to let go and trust them. I'm just going to have to trust them. Well, I just have to trust them. I don't think, I mean, nobody involved now wants to twist it or change it. I mean, nobody wants, yeah. So, no, like, sometimes I get fan casts, you know, like Emma Stone. And I think that would be terrible. But I don't think that's going to happen.
Okay.
Okay.
Do we all feel more confident? A little bit?
You have to know that I am just going to be there. I mean, I have, like, consultation, which means that they don't have to listen, but I get to talk. You have to know that if they were to cast someone who hurt me, I would just never shut up about it, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's your platform, because if you hate the movie.
Yeah, I'm not legally allowed to say so.
Oh, okay.
But
thank you for telling us.
Yes.
Great.
I don't think, but here's the thing.
This is the information I can draw out of her, you see?
Yeah, I'm not legally allowed to say so,
Okay.
I don't think. It's good that I'm telling you now.
Okay.
Right. But how would the readership react if I were to tweet a photo of the cast and it was, you know,
Zac Efron.
Right. I feel like people would be ticked off.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they know that they want the people who love this book to come see the movie. So, I'll do my best. It might not even happen. I mean, I want it to happen. I want it to happen.
I think it's going to happen.
I want it to happen.
I mean, if there are this many people in this room.
Yeah, I want it to happen.
And think about the cities around the world.
Yeah.
You can fill up a stadium,
I want to see them
auditoriums
kiss on screen. I just want it. I want it. I really want it.
Let's talk about that. Let's
Yeah.
talk about the romance.
Let's talk about the romance.
I felt like I didn't want to get off the bus. And I received a great email today about the bus scenes.
Yeah.
Someone writes to you, you describe these physically intimate scenes so vividly that I feel them in my whole body, reread them, and have them burned in my memory.
So it's kind of dirty. Okay.
But
Good.
But the point is that it, in a way that took me back to being 16 years old, to being that age, and to having these first feelings of, you know, wanting and longing for someone you cared about.
Yeah.
So she's wondering, how can you recall the feelings around first young love so very clearly?
Oh.
Do you have a diary from your teenage years where you refer to a secret group of lovesick adolescents that you talk to? Or are you just fantastically talented?
That one, I'm fantastically talented.
So talk to me about being able to evoke those feelings.
Yeah, well, for me, I do think to write a novel, I think most novelists have two things. One, I think we feel things very keenly. When you meet authors, they are often the sort of people who are feeling too much and letting too much in. My whole life, I've had, like, my bosses were always saying, you know, like, you're letting everything in. You're being too thin-skinned, you know. You're absorbing other people's feelings. And yet they would also give me all of the really, like, the obits and the, you know, like the really sad stories to write. Because I was thin-skinned, and I would go interview someone, and I would just feel their emotions hit me. So definitely my whole life, I feel like I soak up ambient emotion. And then I take my own emotions far, far too seriously. But that age, the age that Eleanor and Park are at, I mean, that's an age where every antenna you have is on. And, I mean, when you look back at those years, you know that scene from The Matrix where he's, like, moving in slow motion and dodging bullets? No, that movie's old now, right? You guys weren't born when The Matrix came out. There's a lot of bullet dodging in slow motion. And that's how my teen years, I look back at them and I feel like they were so intense and there was so much happening and I was feeling things so keenly. And those memories are really burned into me. And it helped, I set Eleanor and Park in the neighborhood where I went to high school. They get on the same bus that I got onto. Some of the people in their lives are very real people who were in my life. So by setting it there, it kind of helped me access those 16-year-old feelings more keenly. But I think to write a book, you have to be really empathetic, and you have to be someone who feels things.
I want to thank you as somebody of Asian descent, because this book turned Park, who is Korean, into a sex symbol. I have seen some of the fan art.
Yeah.
I've seen some of the illustrations.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
They're beautiful,
They're beautiful.
but they're the same kind of illustrations that we see for the One Direction kids,
Yeah.
for Justin Bieber. But this is an Asian boy. And the reason why I'm thanking you is because in North America, we haven't made sex symbols of Asians.
Right.
And as a white woman, you have basically told other people that it is great to desire somebody who looks different from you.
Right.
Can you talk about the importance of that, and about the process of doing that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a question that I get asked quite often because there aren't a lot of Asian leading men in YA and in literature. It wasn't something I decided consciously. In fact, I didn't really think about why I had made Park Korean until after I had written the book. And when I think back about it, I think that there was, on that bus that I got on in East Omaha, there was a kid in my neighborhood whose mom was from Vietnam and whose dad was a veteran. And I remember watching him on the bus and thinking how just wondering about him, because we lived in a very, very white neighborhood. And yet he was accepted and popular, and he had cool feathered hair, and he had like a Metallica jacket. And he was far more popular than I was. So he was making it work, and he was very accepted in that environment, even though he would have been one of maybe 4 Asian people at our high school. And then one of the other 4 Asian people at our high school was one of my best friends, Paul. And in hanging out with Paul, he was incredibly charismatic and incredibly cute, very cute. I hope he doesn't watch this, because happily married. But he's very short, and so he would always have a crush on these like tall blonde girls. And I remember just like seeing how, even though he was very popular and very good looking and very charismatic, just sort of seeing how his path was really different. And I would see these girls feel unsure about dating him because he was so much shorter, because he was different. It was almost like they didn't know how to sort him. Like they weren't sure whether they were allowed to find him attractive, honestly. Yes. I really feel that way. Or they weren't sure, like, would people make fun of them if they dated him? Like, it was cool to be his best friend because he was so popular, but could they date him? And when I look back at Paul's high school years, every single one of those girls ended up dating him. So he got to them. But I just saw how this challenge he had every day, even though he was popular and great and smart and cool. So I don't know why I made Park, but I know that when I'm writing Park's character, I'm thinking back to conversations I used to have with Paul when these girls wouldn't go out with him. And I mean, there's a conversation that Park has with Eleanor where he's talking about how there are no Asian men in pop culture in 1986. And she's trying to think of some because she wants to make him feel better, and she can't come up with anything because there weren't. And like she comes up with one guy who's just a white guy playing an Asian guy. And Park is like kind of opening his heart to her, and she doesn't know what to say to him. So in that conversation, when I'm thinking about that, I want people like him to see themselves, I want young guys to see themselves in stories. And I want girls like Eleanor to see themselves in stories. So both of those characters, for me, are characters who don't get to be the romantic lead. They get to be the best friend or the comic relief. I mean, one of the only Asian boys who I could think of when I was growing up was Data from The Goonies.
Yeah.
Yeah. He didn't get any of the girls.
No. He was comic relief.
He was comic relief, yeah. And for me, it was just, the world is not full of Zac Efrons. I'm not even saying his name right. He doesn't need it. The world is not full. The world is full of us. And we get to be the romantic leads in our lives. Like, in our lives, we are not just the best friend or the comic relief or the person who shows up for one episode and has a problem. Like, that's not who we are. We are all different, we look different, we feel different, but in our lives, we are the protagonists. And so when I'm writing all of my books, I'm thinking about making someone the protagonist who might not get to be the protagonist, usually.
And I think that that's one of the many reasons why people have attached themselves so much to this story and formed a community here. And here we are in a library.
Yes.
And I'm going to go into an area that's, was a little bit difficult for you because there was a library that didn't want your story.
Oh, right, yeah.
And it was a library in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And they wanted to ban Eleanor Park,
Yeah.
despite all the beauty in this story,
Yeah.
because of some swears.
Yes.
Some
cuss
language.
words, yeah. Yeah.
But now we are here in a library in Toronto. We've packed this room because all these people believe in the story, in the integrity of this story. You said, though, that you were so hurt because you felt that they were telling you, or telling everybody who was starting from the bottom, that they had no chance, that they still would never have a chance.
Right.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of difficult things in the book. And I think if you take any of those things out of context, it can seem like a totally different book. So when they went through and they just circled any sort of curse word, any mention of sex, I remember reading the story, and it was one parent started this. So it was one parent who read the book. It was an optional summer read for the largest school district in Minnesota. And all of the librarians had gotten together for the high schools, and they had chosen this book as the summer read. They invited me to come. I was supposed to speak at the community library and at the school library. And one parent read the book and then went to the Parent Action League, I think it was called, and got a bunch of other parents who had not read the book. And he was like, look at this, look at all the curse words, look at all the sex, this is a disgusting book. And then if you read the book, there's more cussing on the first 2 pages than the rest of the book because it's on the bus. And I'm trying to show everything that's happening on this bus and kind of what chaotic it is. So I read the report and I thought, this is not my book. This is a book that's all about sex. Like, I didn't write that book yet. It was so deeply frustrating because I would want to say, but the context of this is, for example, that first scene, the very first line of the book is like, Park turned up the volume to block out all the idiots on the bus. In that scene, he is trying to block out the cursing and block it all out. So for you to say that that scene is all about cursing when it's really about a kid trying to focus, and then a lot of the F words that they circled were either Eleanor's stepdad or Eleanor thinking about how her stepdad used the F word so much that she'd internalized it and she felt like he was tainting her with his violence. I mean, frankly, I use the F word, so I don't think it's a horrible word. But in the book, I use it sort of strategically. And so I thought, you're getting mad at a scene where she's talking about how she doesn't want to swear. Like, that's madness. But more than anything else, I feel like they were worried that there was just too much pain in the book and that Eleanor's situation with her stepdad was going to be too much for the kids. I mean, the worst parts, the worst lines of the book, I'm going to spoil it. So
I think you're okay here.
The worst lines of the book are the things that the stepdad writes. Those are the most sexually frank, awful, violent things in the book. So that's what they didn't want their kids to read. And it just made me feel like, Eleanor and Park are both two kids who try so hard. They don't always get it right, They say really dumb things sometimes and hurtful things. But they try so hard, and they're both trying to rise above. They're trying to rise above sort of what's happening in their life. And I just felt like there are kids in this school district who are trying to rise above, and they're trying to be good kids, and they're trying to make good choices, and they're surrounded by pain. And you're saying to them, your story is so dirty that good people, it's too good for good people. Good people like us don't even want to hear your story. You need to keep your secrets. You need to keep your dirtiness to yourself. And the rest of the world, we can't be touched by it. I just felt so defensive of them. Like, Eleanor has done nothing wrong. She gets to tell her story.
And we love you here at the Toronto Library.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Oh, thank you. And I should say that happened during Banned Books Week when every reporter in America was looking for a story about a banned book. And then like I'm sure it sold so many copies. And then I ended up going to Minnesota, and I've been 4 times. The city of St. Paul chose my book as their all-city read. I've been a lot. And I feel like people in Minnesota ended up reading my book more than anywhere else in the world. So it's fine. It was painful at the time, but it's all good.
Your characters in Eleanor Park and your character in Fangirl.
Yeah.
My friend who's here tonight, she wrote this note to me the other day. She said, Rainbow doesn't write about people who have experience.
Oh, that's interesting. Who's your friend? Do you need to elaborate? Okay. Who have experiences? Yeah.
Right. Kat, like when you're writing, Kat, when she was writing fan fiction, it was a way. I mean, she got so much out of it.
Yeah.
But it was also her way of hiding.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
not going out into the world. Why do you find people who don't? And her roommate, meanwhile, though, was out discovering the world and having experiences.
Yeah.
What draws you to people who aren't there yet?
I'm probably not there yet. So every time I start a new book, I just wrote a short story for an anthology that's coming out this fall. It's a Christmas anthology called My True Love Gave to Me, with Stephanie Perkins and Gil Foreman and David Levithan. So I'm writing this short story, and I was testing the characters, the main characters, against all of my other main characters. So I've written 4 books now. So that's like 8 to 12 people. And I was testing, like, is Noel Park? Is he Levi? Is he Lincoln? Is he Kath? Is he, And I was going through them, and to my satisfaction, I realized all of these characters are pretty different. I'm proud of myself. I haven't quite gone back to the well and written the same character, but they're all super tight. Every single character I write, at least all of my main characters, are like this, for different reasons and in different ways. But Eleanor is like got walls. And Park has walls, but they're different walls. Kath has 10-foot walls, and they're 30 feet deep, for different reasons. And I think it's because that's who I am. I have a lot of social anxiety. I feel like I had a hard childhood and a miserable teenage years. And I think that I built up defenses, that my way of relating to people is to be very cautious with them, and to be very cautious in life because I'm really afraid of screwing up. So I think I tend to write characters who are afraid. They're just afraid for one reason or another. They're afraid to go out into the world. They're people who at least feel like they're watching on the sidelines, sometimes even when they're not. In Attachments, there's a moment where Lincoln realizes his life is so much richer. He sees himself as the person who's only observing, but then his life is kind of full of people who love him. So I think that's just who I am. I don't know how many times I can write a character. I mean, when do I run out of characters with different types of anxiety and tightness? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe there's a lot of anxious people in the world, so maybe I have a lot of space. Yeah.
In Fangirl, we're dealing with, the story is around twins.
Yeah.
In Landline, there are twins.
Are there?
There's some twins. No,
Or there's sisters who look alike.
Sisters who look. Do you have a thing? That's
I do. Yeah, I've got a thing.
Is there a thing for twins?
It's not. It's not.
That's your question
It's
too.
an identity thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is your thing with
It's
twins?
in every book too. So like in Attachments, Lincoln's mom, he describes the sister as looking like the mom if she had spent her life being more stressed out.
Yeah.
And then in Eleanor Park, Eleanor looks like her mom through a blurry mirror. So she feels thicker and smeared compared to her mom. Then Kath and Ren. And then in Landline, they're the 2 sisters and the mom. Yeah, I'm kind of a hack for it. And I have a friend who was like, no, it's okay, because you can read Jane Austen and she basically writes some of the same. It's just a theme. It's not a hackiness. It's a theme. I look exactly like my mom. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so like people, when I worked for the newspaper, people would recognize my mom and either think she was me or think you must be. I mean, we looked that much alike. Like when she would come up to my high school, people would just know she was my mom. But my mom is very, very beautiful. Like in a much more conventional way than I will ever be beautiful. So my dad was this sort of like short, fat guy. So I ended up being like my mom, but like shorter and fatter and like thicker and messier. And I think my whole life, it really like hung, because I couldn't go anywhere without people saying, you look like I sound exactly like her, I laugh exactly like her. When I see photos of myself, I often think it's her. It's creepy. My stepdad would walk into the kitchen and think I was my mom. Like, it was just weird growing. He never did anything bad, but it would just be like, he'd say, hey, babe, and I'd be like, I'm not your wife! And my mom and I are completely different. We're radically, radically different. And I just read Lainey's book, Listen to the Squawking Chicken, right? It's amazing. So it's amazing. It's an amazing memoir. And I don't usually read memoirs. And so I was not excited to read it. And then I did not put... Well, I'm being honest.
I appreciate
I
that.
like you, so I thought, well, I'm going to read her book because I like her. And then I couldn't put it down. It's riveting, your relationship with your mom, which has some parallels to my relationship with my own mother. But anyway, you should read it. It's great. So, yeah, we're so different. We're so different. And she treats me like we're the same. She treats me like I'm the one who's like her because I look just like her. So of all my brothers and sisters, she thinks I'm going to be the one who's going to be just like her. And it messed with me bad. So I keep writing these books where people look alike but get to be different, or look alike but wrestle with what does it mean to look exactly like someone. I don't know if I'm ever going to stop doing that. I hope so. I don't feel like I have much more to explore.
No, I like this.
Okay.
I like this.
Yeah.
No, I like the common thread. I mean, I didn't
theme.
notice it till my girlfriend pointed it out. Mm-hmm. And then you just totally pointed it out.
Yeah,
You just
it's in
admitted
all
it
of
to
them.
me.
It's
I
in
feel
all
like
of
I
them.
drew it out of you.
Yeah, you did.
We established that you are a major Harry Potter fan.
I'm a huge Harry Potter fan, yeah.
And so Kath
Yes.
is a fan of a story that's inspired-ish by
Ish. Simon Snow, yeah.
by Harry Potter.
They're very different. His name is Simon Snow.
Right. Yes.
His name is Harry Potter.
And he's got a best friend.
Yeah.
And okay. Anyway, so
Very different.
J.K. Rowling always says that she's got boxes and boxes of backstory, right?
Yeah.
And maps, and she's drawn out the animals and the characters. And
Right.
How much Simon Snow backstory do you have that didn't make it into Fangirl?
Well, I did not have much when Fangirl was published. But I really didn't stop thinking about Simon Snow and thinking about what I would do with Simon Snow. Because I kept thinking about, Simon Snow is not Harry Potter, but he's sort of the stand-in for that chosen one character and those characters that we keep coming back to. I mean, Harry Potter is not the first person. Jesus was that character. You know, he's the chosen one. Yeah. I meet people now who think magic wands were originated. Like, we had chosen ones and magic wands before Harry Potter. But okay, obviously, Harry Potter affected me. These stories affect me. I was thinking, and in that book, I got to explore, like, what Kath would do with this character, Simon Snow. But then after I left it, I was like, well, what would I do with Simon Snow? And what would I do with Baz? Baz is my favorite character maybe in that book. I just love that character. And so I now have a lot more. I have a lot more. Perhaps you will get to read it someday.
So you have been adding to it after the publication of Fangirl.
Yes, indeed I have been writing a lot.
I read an interview that you did,
Yes.
and it was after you had signed the deal for the movie,
Yes,
and you said you were writing the screenplay,
yes.
and you were like, I've never written a screenplay before, but I'm now reading screenplays,
Right.
And you said, I think I might be good at it.
Yeah, why not?
And I read that quote, and I loved you even more
Oh, thank
because I didn't read it as cocky. I read it as confident.
You got like a Kanye West vibe.
Not
I'm owning how talented I am.
There was no swagger. It was just
Okay.
the plain truth.
Okay.
You thought that you might be good at it.
Right, I think I might be good at it.
And I loved not that, I didn't necessarily love your confidence. I loved that you were comfortable with being confident.
Oh, thank you.
And I find that that's where a lot of your characters are going, that they're trying to be
Yeah.
more comfortable with their confidence.
Right.
How did you get there? Or
Oh.
what are some tips that you can give the people in the room who might be struggling with that too?
I have never been asked that question. Thank you. That's a good question. And thank you for being happy that I was confident. You know,
You don't hear that from women.
yeah, it's hard. It's very hard.
There's
You
like
want-
humility. There's like, I'm going to try my best and I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But you just came out and said, I
Yeah.
think I might be good at it.
Well, I mean, I see movies and they're mostly bad. So I feel like I won't write the worst screenplay that is written this year. Thank you. So when I graduated from college, I went to work right away at a newspaper, and I became a newspaper columnist almost immediately. And I had that job for 10 years, where I was a newspaper columnist. And it was a very good job, and it was a job everybody in the room wanted, and so it really felt like I could never leave. And I got very, very depressed. I got very unsure of myself. I started to feel like maybe this was the only job I could ever do, that anyone would ever want me to do, and I wasn't even that good at it. And I really got to a place by my late 20s when I started writing attachments where I felt my self-esteem was so low. Like, I couldn't think about the fact that I'd been given this great job when I was right out of college. I didn't think about that. All I could think about was like, I don't think I'm very good at this. I think people are making fun of me. I think people think they could do this job better. I remember saying to a friend, well, I don't think I could get another job. Well, who would hire me to do anything? And she was like, you're a great writer. But I was so like, I just felt like nothing. I quit that job and went to work in advertising. And I was a copywriter, and then I became a creative director. And it was the best thing I ever did. Walking away from that job, which was supposed to be my dream job, was the very best thing I ever did, because it showed me that that you get to keep inventing yourself, and you get to keep growing, and you get to keep becoming who you are. You don't just become who you are when you're, I think you have this feeling, you become something when you graduate from college and you get that job and that's what you are. And everyone around me was like, well, you could never leave, we're journalists, you could never leave the newspaper, what would you even do? I mean, really, people at newspapers think that those are the only jobs that exist, which is a problem now that they're closing. Okay, so I quit that job and I took this like entry-level job, and I was so good at it. I was so obviously good at this totally different thing. And it made me think like, perhaps I am infinite. What else am I good at? There must be something. And like, not everything. I am not good at everything, but that's okay. There might be other things I'm good at. It just was this like walking off a cliff, and I did not hit the ground. I landed someplace even better than I was before. And then I started writing my novel, you know, and I finished my novel. And again, it was this feeling of, I might not be able to do this. But if at that point, if you fail, really, what are you losing? You weren't a novelist before, and you're still not a novelist. You know, like, there's no loss. So yeah, it just taught me to trust myself, and to look back at the times I've succeeded, and to not bet against myself. I think we spend a lot of times betting against ourselves. But to kind of, I think part of it is age. I think we're exactly the same age.
We are.
Yeah, because I'm also
an ox.
Yes. And frankly, that's how I approach life. Anyway, at a certain point, too, you have enough life behind you that you can kind of look back at what you've screwed up and what you haven't screwed up, and you can say, oh, well, you know what? There's a lot I didn't screw up. Perhaps there's more that I won't screw up, you know?
You're reminding me of one of my favorite quotes from George Clooney. I had to throw a celebrity in.
Good, George Clooney quotes. I get this a lot, me and George Clooney.
You and George Clooney. George Clooney says that one of the best things for him is that success reached him in his 30s,
yes,
when he made all his mistakes in his 20s and he didn't have the
yes,
exposure. Would you have wanted this lightning to have hit in your writing career earlier? Or like, how do you feel that it hit you at 39, 38?
Yeah, right, and even
Not to reveal your age.
No, I'm 41. But it's fine. Look at me, I've lived 41 years. Have you done that? I don't think so. Looking at you. All right, you have. Really? Huh, okay. You know, I look back sometimes. So there were people writing novels when I was in college in my English program, and I remember thinking they were like so self-absorbed. Like, I'm going to get a job. I'm not going to write a novel. I'm going to buy a car, and it's going to be a Saturn because I'm a practical girl. That's what I did. I look back on it now and think, if I hadn't grown up in a really, really depressing way, surrounded by people who did not, you know, either didn't have enough energy to care what happened to me, or just legitimately didn't care about me, I mean, would I have felt more confident? You know, would I have maybe believed in myself? I think I could have written a novel in college. I don't think it would have been a great novel. I think by going out and working and writing as a columnist for all those years, I got better. I got way, way, way better. So I think I probably could have written a novel in college. It might have been fine. I don't think it would have been as good as the novels that I'm writing now. And I don't think I would have been as prepared, not just for the success, but also for the failures. You know, like Attachments came out and my editor immediately got laid off. And so my publisher did not buy Eleanor Park. And then Eleanor Park was a really, really tough sell. Yeah. It was a very tough sell.
This makes me crazy.
I know. So it was a very tough sell, and it took a long time to sell. And I remember thinking, okay, I've written one book. I think if I had been 23, and my first book had come out and gotten great reviews, but then not really made any money at all, which Attachments didn't make any money, and then my next book had gotten rejected, I think it would have just felt like I was being rejected as a human being. But it didn't feel that way. I was super proud of Eleanor Park. And I remember talking to my agent. I was in the Starbucks parking lot, and I'd had a very depressing call. He'd gotten depressing news with an editor, the only editor who had wanted Eleanor Park, and she was changing her mind unless I changed it in a really stupid way. It was stupid. She basically she was making all of these suggestions that were pretty, like they were all 16 candles. Like I'd be like, yeah, that was a great idea in 16 candles. Like that's great. That's a great story. That's actually good. Okay, so no, it wasn't 16 candles. It's Pretty in Pink. Both good. I don't want to write those books. So he was like, that's the only person who wants it. No, and I just remember saying to him, I don't care. I have a life. I have written the book I want to write. I don't regret writing that book. I love that book. It's fine if only my sister and I read it. It's okay. And I think if I'd been younger, maybe I would have been, I know, because I was a mess in my 20s. I was a complete mess, and everything hit me so hard, and I fell down so much, and I spent so much of my 20s depressed. So I know that failure, it felt like a failure. I felt like my career was over. I think you deal with success better maybe because you know that it's not, you're still who you are. You're still who you are. You're already who you are, and you know that, and you're going to be okay, I think.
I hope that helps every aspiring writer out there, because I know there are many of you. I'm going to open it up to you guys now. So there's a microphone in the middle. If you could speak into come up. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. She's only here for another few minutes. So come on up and ask that question. I know someone has to ask.
Someone has a question. I know
someone has to ask a 3-word question.
Go do it, lady. Yeah, do it. Ask a question.
I know, yeah.
I hear you talking a lot about yourself and all these characters.
Yeah.
Which of you do you see in
which of them is most like
yeah.
me? Yeah. I mean, I think that you're in every character. So you end up you are an infinite. Human beings are much richer and more dense than characters. And so you can I take little bits of myself and give them to each of them. Probably the character who's most like me is Georgie, who's the main character of my next book, Landline. I mean, she's an adult. She's in a situation very similar to mine. She has a marriage very similar to mine, although bad. Like her marriage is in trouble, which was kind of hard for me to write that book. And I'd say to my husband, who still hasn't read it, I keep trying to get him to read it, and I'll say, their marriage is kind of like ours, but if it were bad. Because not like ours, because ours is great, but theirs is kind of bad. So probably Georgie. And then Beth in Attachments probably has my sense of humor. So when I was writing Attachments, if I thought of a joke that I would tell, I would give it to Beth. And if I thought of a joke that was sort of depressing and mean, that I would give it to Jennifer. So, yeah. So, yeah, probably. And I mean, I was a lot like Eleanor when I was younger, although I was not as tough as Eleanor. Eleanor has a lot of me in her, but she's much tougher and cooler, and she keeps her head up a lot better than I ever did. That's a good question. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? This is kind of a general question, but do you have any advice for aspiring writers?
Advice for aspiring writers. Yeah. My advice is to read a lot, to really fill yourself up with language, because you need to find your own voice, but the way you're going to do that is to fill yourself up with other voices and to get toxic with language. So you're just so full of words that it has to come out of you. So read, and then write, and don't be a perfectionist. So I meet a lot of young writers who talk about writing a lot. They talk about it a lot. I'm a writer, and I've been thinking a lot about doing this, and I've been talking a lot about doing that. I'm like, yeah, writers don't actually think and talk. They just write, The next time you find yourself talking about writing, perhaps you should just be writing. I think you can spend years. I spent years talking about my first book, and it was because I was afraid to start. But when you walk around the library, those aren't necessarily the books written by the best authors or the best writers. Those are the books written by the people who finished books. So you just have to do it. So, yeah.
Also, I love your shoes.
Thank you.
You tweeted about them.
I did. You know what? And I almost didn't wear them because they're very heavy and they took up 1/2 of my suitcase. But I'm wearing them. Hello.
Try and
Hi.
project so the people in the back of the room
Question's
can hear
gonna
you.
suck now, but how do you come up with the names for your characters?
How does she come up with the names for her characters?
I'm super picky about names, actually. I spent a lot of time on it at the beginning, and I say them out loud a lot. And I notice that I'm drawn to certain sounds. So there are the F sound. I've got a Beth, a Seth, an Elspeth. I just really like that. And I like it because it's like a whisper. And so the thing that I practice saying over and over, I know at some point in the book, someone is going to express an endearment. They're going to say, I love you. And so I'll say over and over as I'm writing, I'll be like, I love you, Beth. All right? I love you, Danny. I love you. I love you. And I practice it, and I like those sounds, and I like E sounds. So like I like when you say, I love you, Beth, the way it ends in kind of a whisper. I've tried to change names before late in the game, and I'll go back and I'll feel like it ruins every sentence because it's a rhythm and there's alliteration, and so I try them out. And then I don't let people have too weird a name. Like you can only have one weird name in a book, I think. And so I go to the Social Security names database, and it's really cool. It's fun. And I look it up by year, so I look at like what were people being named in that year, and then also regionally you can search by state, because like in my state, biblical names are super popular, so Old Testament names especially. So my Nebraska guys get names like Levi a lot of the time. Yeah, so that's how I do it, and then I practice. So like in my new book, Georgie, I really like the name Georgie, but I thought, okay, that's kind of an unusual name, so everybody else in that book has to have a very normal name. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Hi. Does
Hi.
this work?
You know what? It's not for this.
It's connected to the camera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you watch yourself later on the internet, you'll be able to hear it.
Okay, so okay, so do you have any? Because as you said before, like you write a lot about people who are on the sidelines, who
Yeah.
should be like who are in traditional books, kind of, or stories.
Yeah,
They're
stories.
on the sidelines. So is there anything you have to say that just to kind of how you would show that you're more than just someone who's just comic relief, or just someone who's
You
for
mean
the
in your
side?
own life or in writing?
In your own life.
I think it's just thinking about yourself that way. Simone Blocker is a New York City illustrator who has done a lot of art for Eleanor Park. Her art is phenomenal. And in fact, Indigo is doing a special edition of Eleanor Park this summer that has Simone's artwork in it. It's really striking. Simone wrote, someone asked her on Tumblr why she did so much Eleanor Park art, and she talked about how she's a huge reader and book fan, and how she had never been able to see herself as the sort of person who could lead an adventure. Like, so even when she was fantasizing about these stories, she wasn't fantasizing herself as the lead.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's kind of depressing. I feel like if you're not Princess Leia in your fantasies, when are you ever going to be Princess Leia?
Yeah,
You don't want to be like one of Padme's handmaids. I think it's just accepting. There's a myth, and we all kind of buy into it, that the people we see on television and that we see in magazines, that those are the beautiful people, and that the beautiful people get to have adventures and get to do these, and that we're all trolls, you know. And sometimes I think like we're even mean to people who look like us when they become famous. You know, when someone becomes famous and they don't look conventional, like we want to tear them down. I think it's just rejecting the idea that you have to look a really this certain way and that you have to behave a certain way, because most of us are on the sidelines. Most of us feel that way. I think most of us feel like we're not quite fitting in. I mean, we're on the outside looking in. That's a very common, universal feeling, I think. So I think it's just practicing, like rejecting the idea that the world isn't for you, or that love isn't for you, or that life isn't for you, and thinking about yourself as the star of your life, you know, like this is your story. You are the star. I mean, that sounds cheesy, so that might not be helpful, but
No.
that's all I got. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Hello.
Hello.
You have really beautiful hair.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'm not sure if this is mentioned already because I was stuck in traffic, but I was just wondering, you tweeted a few days ago about the possibility of an Eleanor Park sequel.
Yes, you did miss it, so let me see if there's any more that I can add.
Okay, sorry.
No, basically, I've got an idea in my head, and if I'm ever brave enough, I think I will write it. I think I'll write it. I think about it a lot. I know what songs are on the soundtrack in my head. I mean, and I've sort of promised a few friends that I'll write it, so I have this idea that maybe I'll take like a month and just write as much as I can and then show someone I trust. But it would not be a young adult book. So sometimes I think, well, maybe I should wait until the teenagers who are reading it now are a little older so that they care about
No, because then I'll be too old.
You'll be. You can get it in large print. So yeah, it's not the next book I write, and it's not the next book after that. But I'd love to do it.
Good to know.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. You have to promise to read it now. I will. Okay.
I just really love all of your books.
Thank
and
you so
something
much.
that I really resonated me, and I'm sure with other Toronto readers, is the setting, that it was not New York City
Yeah.
like it is in every other young adult
Right.
novel. And I'm just wondering if you had any pressure to make it a more like urban setting or not Nebraska.
Oh, that's
It's like-
interesting. I mean, she was saying it resonates maybe with her in Toronto because it's not New York City, it's not LA, it's the Midwest. People don't realize, like, when I was telling everybody that I was coming to Toronto, they're like, oh, that's so far, it's in Canada. I was like, no, it's like directly above me. This was a very short trip for me, actually. And actually, Toronto kind of reminds me of Omaha in certain ways, although you guys are much more metropolitan than we are. No one ever pressured me, but it made the books more difficult to sell.
Okay.
Because, like, especially like in England, Fangirl initially was a difficult sell in England. It's doing very well in the UK. I should just say the UK, not just England. It's doing very well there now, but initially people thought, well, do people care about the Midwest? You know, because we don't have a picture of the Midwest in our heads. We have a picture of New York City. We have a picture of Los Angeles. In fact, there are Nebraska authors, who write about, like, I know an author who writes noir, and he was saying that all of his early books were about Los Angeles because it didn't occur to him that he could write noir in Omaha. And, like, it was like the world opened up when he realized that. For me, I felt like my stories it doesn't matter where they are. Like, I don't think people reading my books who don't know about Omaha are like, Omaha, where is that? I am distracted. I can't even picture this. I think largely people don't notice, but the people from the Midwest totally notice, and people from Nebraska especially. There's a George Clooney movie. What is it? Up in the Air? Yeah? Okay. It was filmed partly, not hardly at all, in Omaha. There's a scene where George Clooney walks through the Omaha airport. It's on the DVD, like it's an extra. When that movie came out on DVD, all of my Facebook friends were like, you need to check this out so that you can see George Clooney walk through our airport. That's how excited we are to see ourselves represented in popular culture.
Which fits with what you're saying about moving these characters into instead of being on the sidelines. Your setting is not in the sidelines.
Yeah, so I just felt like, no, this is going to be here. And Omaha is never mentioned in Attachments, but Attachments is my most Omaha book because there's everything there is actually in Omaha. So I felt like, I'm terrible with names. Who's the director who does everything in Baltimore? John Waters. John Waters, every story is sort of a tribute to Baltimore, and if you watch his movies, you really get a sense of place, especially after you've seen a few of them, of what his Baltimore. And so I felt like that's what I want to do. I just want to keep writing Nebraska books. I don't think anybody else cares. I don't think anyone else is sick of it. And I really like that people get a sense of place. And then I love it when people say to me, my editor actually said, and she came to Omaha. She said, I really want to come to Omaha. It sounds so cool. I was like, Sarah, it's not. It's not cool at all. She's like, I want to come. We're going to go eat at the taco truck, and then we're going to walk around the park. So that's what we did. We took the Eleanor Park tour of Omaha, and that was enough. And then it was time for her to go back to New York. But so I like it. I like it.
Yeah, I do too.
Good. I'm glad you do too. Sometimes people ask me what makes my book Midwestern, and when I try to think about it, and I'm like, well, they're in cars a lot. I don't know. Yeah. Hello.
Hi. So I was wondering where you get inspiration for your books, because they're all just really like multifaceted and distinct. And you talked a little bit about your family and your teenage years. So
Yeah.
are there any other sources that you draw on for ideas and inspiration?
So the question is where I get inspiration. Definitely from my own life. And often it's a problem. Often I take a problem that I have and I give it to the characters and I really let them work on it. Should we say nobody else can get in line? Are we?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think at this point we're going to have to leave it as the people who are in line, and then because Rainbow's going to sign books,
yeah.
so we need to also make sure you have enough time with her to sign the book. Anyway,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I did that. I'm sorry. So often it's a problem or something I'm concerned about. So like when I wrote Landline, which is about a marriage it's kind of like every marital anxiety I could ever have packed into one book. And with Fangirl, I was obsessed with fan fiction when I wrote that book, obsessed with fan fiction. And I was thinking so much about how fan fiction would have changed my life as a young person. And often it's just, like with Eleanor Park, music was a huge, huge part of my writing of that book. So I I try to take inspiration not necessarily from other books, but from things that I'm passionate about or that I can't stop thinking about. If I can't stop thinking about something, it's like I want a way to let that out. If I'm worried about something, if I'm in love with something. So yeah, my next book will feature someone who looks just like Benedict Cumberbatch, because I feel like I feel like that's the only way to get these feelings out of me. I need to spend 100,000 words with his chinless wonder, and then maybe
I can't.
It's good that you can't, because I don't want to share him with you.
I can't.
Okay. I can't. So yeah, yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you for your question.
Hi.
I like your flower crown.
Oh, thank you. Okay, first of all, I have stuff.
Are those for me?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
thank you. We'll bring them up and I'll
You
take
can
it.
share them.
Oh, can we share?
Oh,
good.
thank
Good
you.
for both of us. It's really lovely. Are those fresh flowers?
Sort of. They're fresh when I left.
Thank you. They're beautiful. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
I was wondering if you had a horrible, horrible time in middle school.
Did I have a horrible time in middle school? I had a wretched, wretched, wretched time in middle school. It was the worst years of my life. Yeah. Are you having a horrible time in middle school?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awful. It's awful because, everything is changing inside of you and everything is changing inside of everyone else, and they're cruel. And it's awful that you have to go through such painful changes on a stage with everyone watching you. We should be able to go into the West for those years and emerge, So you will get through it though. You will,
Awesome.
how old are you?
12. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, wow, you strike me as much older than that, in a good way. Yeah, although there's nothing wrong with being 12. You're gonna be fine, you're gonna be fine. And isn't it nice to know that you're in the very worst, probably? You're only 12 and you've already encountered the worst years of your life.
Awesome.
I just feel like you're gonna be through them so quickly, and it's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. Yeah, yeah,
Awesome.
okay. Hello.
So I was just wondering, when you're writing, if you're sitting somewhere, can you close your eyes and picture what you're writing, or can you sit there and hear what the characters are saying and say them out
Yeah.
loud?
Do I when I'm writing, do I kind of immerse myself? Can I see it happening? Can I hear it
Yeah.
happening? Yeah, I do. I lose myself in it. Have you ever seen a freestyle rapper? And I'm a lot like that. No, but you're watching him and you're like, did they come up with these rhymes ahead of time? Maybe they did actually, but in the moment, or when you see someone jump roping and they're not thinking, they're just jumping you watch people jump rope a lot, right? So that's how it feels. When I'm writing, I am not present in a really conscious way going, what would this person say? Probably they would say that. What's a funny joke that could go here? It's not like that at all. I'm lost in it, and it's just kind of, it really feels like it's happening through me. I'm not an author who says, the characters just speak through me. It's like I'm channeling. But I understand why authors say that, because that is how it feels. You just get lost, you get lost in the side of your brain. It would be the side. There's no time and space here, and there's no planning, and there's no strategy. Things are just happening. So that's where I write, and I write dialogue first. So my first drafts are very dialogue heavy, because that's how I develop characters. And it's really weird, because I'll be writing a scene with 4 different characters, and it's like I'm just shifting between them, and I'm not thinking about it. It's just happening. So yeah. And then certain characters stay with me for a long time. Levi from Fangirl, I could still be writing about. I love him.
Please, go for it.
Yeah, okay. I've written a little bit more about Levi. But so yeah, certain characters really, really stay with me. Park's dad, I loved writing Park's dad. I could write a short story just about Park's dad. I loved him so much. So Justin, Lincoln's obnoxious friend in Attachments, he kept getting more and more scenes. And I don't sound anything like him as a person, but I loved writing him. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hello.
Hi. I just want to say that Eleanor Park is probably it is my favorite book of all
Oh,
time.
you
so
should stop reading now. It's just you and me forever.
I wish. And I'm obsessed with Park.
Yeah.
I don't think it's because he's Asian, but I love him.
It's because he's amazing.
He's
It's why.
awesome. He's awesome. And just the ending had me bawling. So.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's my question. I want to ask you, was the ending, how
Yeah.
you ended it in Eleanor Park, was that your like initial kind of way, or did you have like other ideas?
Well, I had an idea where they kissed a lot and were happy, and I thought, no. No, I didn't. I knew from the very beginning of that book how it was going to end, and I knew what the last words of the book were going to be. Like, that doesn't always happen, but it often happens for me. I just knew it was going to end that way, and I knew it had to end that way. And I felt very protective of them because they're young, and I'm a mother. And I felt like they were both. And actually, I think that's part of the reason why I wrote the rest of the story in my head, because I needed to give myself a reality in my head where they were okay. Because I felt like I was doing them such damage. I mean, Eleanor starts out in a very bad place. I did that to her. Then Park, honestly, then I gave Park Eleanor. And Eleanor changes Park's life, but then she kind of ruins him. I mean, who is Park going to date after Eleanor? It's not going to go well. It doesn't go well, you know, and if they're not together, they're always going to have that other person to compare. I just feel like neither of them can follow up the other. But as the book went on and I knew that she was going to leave him, I felt like I am hurting this. What did he do to deserve this? He's such a great guy. My husband didn't read Eleanor Park until a couple of months ago, and he's still mad. And he had been defending me. I was like, people are really mad about the ending, and he would defend me. Like, you have to write the ending, blah, 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 blah. Good, you did what you had to do. And then he read the book, and he was like, what? Why would you do that to that guy? He's a great guy. What did he do to deserve that? And I was like, are you mad at me, or are you mad at Eleanor? And he was like, I don't even know anymore. I knew it was going to end that way. It had to end that way. I mean, if I would have given them, and they lived happily ever after, it would not have been believable. And I thought about it. How? Are they going to get an apartment? What's going to happen? There's no way. And is Eleanor going to be, Eleanor is just trying to keep herself alive. She's not ready to have that relationship. Eleanor is not ready to, it's almost a curse to fall in love that young in such a real way, because you're not, it's like being handed a gift that is too heavy for you to hold on to. Both of them, it was like it changed them. I think it was wonderful for them, but it was too big for them. So really for both of them to come out alive and still sort of loving each other, I think was the best that I could do. Are you mad?
I'm like in love with you.
No.
It's so smart what you're saying. I can't.
So when people tell me,
Continue.
I feel like I should be sitting closer to you and like patting your hair.
I cannot get close to you.
So when people talk to me about why I didn't give them a happy ending, I feel like because they're 17 and you don't get a happy ending when you're 17. You get a beginning. If you're lucky, you get a world of beginnings, but you don't get an ending.
It's
you know?
so sad. I'm crying. Oh my god, because I'm thinking. It's so sad. I'm sorry. Oh my god. Yeah, I know. I love that. I just love that book, and thank you for writing it.
Oh, thank you for reading it. Thank you. Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
I felt like Augustus Waters when I read the ending because I was like, where's the rest of the book?
Yeah.
But for Cather and Ren,
Yeah.
Catherine,
Yeah.
where'd that come from? Like, I was so confused at the beginning. I was like, oh yeah, Cather and Ren, like those are so unusual names.
Yeah.
But then I got it when, I was like, oh my god, like I got it.
You had the Levi moment when you went, Catherine.
Yeah, like I shouted it in class and like.
Well, okay, so Cather and Ren are the twins in Fangirl, and it's revealed that their mom didn't want to think up another name when she had twins, and that's typical of their mom to like not want to invest anything in those kids that she didn't have to. So my grandmother was a twin, and in this huge Italian family, and I think she was like seventh. And my great grandmother was a very practical woman who was tired of having children, to be perfectly frank, and had already picked out the name Josephina. And so when she had twins, they were like, what are you going to name them? And she went, Josie and Fina, which I always thought was hilarious. And so I gave it to them. But I had a hard time. I didn't want to name them Josephina because I knew someone named Josephina, and she was too close in my head. And I had a really hard time coming up with a name that could be split. And I came up with Cather and Ren, which isn't perfect, Cather, Ren. And so my agent, who's one of my best friends, was like, you cannot name a character Cather. I was like, yeah, I can. It's a Nebraska thing. Willa Cather. And he was like, it sounds like catheter. It's awkward. It's hard to say. Oh, there's another Cath. You can't name her Cather. And then the more he said it, the more I was like, or I totally can. Nobody minds. Nobody minds that her name is Catherine. Not a single person has complained about it. And Kath is kind of a cool name. And then there's that Death Cab for Cutie song, Kath. So it's fine. It's fun. But that's why I did it.
And I got Twitter for you because
You
you were
did
like,
what?
I got Twitter for you.
You got Twitter for me?
Yeah, like I didn't have
Awesome.
Twitter before, and then you were like, I don't have an email, so tweet me.
If
and
you
I was
tweet
like,
at me, I almost 90% of the time I will tweet back at you. If you email me, even if you are someone who needs me to sign a contract, I will never email you back. Ever. I don't return email ever. But I will tweet at you. So
yeah,
fun.
you tweeted me.
Oh, I did? Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, it was nice to talk to you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi.
I'm just going to say, I think I love Eleanor Park and Fangirl. I think they're really well written.
Thank you.
And the characters are just amazing. So I just wanted to know, when did you know you wanted to be an author for novels?
When did I know that I wanted to be an author? Well, I was always a reader, so I was always really, really loved to read. But I never would have said I wanted to be an author. I mean, I think like that would have been like saying, I want to be a movie star, or I want to be a magician. I think I'll just be a magician, you know? Like, how does that work? It never, ever would have occurred to me that that was something that normal people did. I thought of people who wrote books as being this like very exotic, you know, glorified, rarefied type of person. I started writing attachments because I told you I was super depressed and I worked at a newspaper and I thought I was awful. And I could never get jokes into my column because I had like 6 editors and every single one of them had to find a joke funny before it could get into my column. What joke? Wow. What joke will 6 people find funny? There's no joke. And especially these 6 people. Like, so it was so depressing to me to watch my jokes get killed. And so I started writing attachments, and my goal was simply, I'm just going to write something where nobody can touch my jokes. And if I heard one of their voices, and this is how they sounded, I don't know if our readers will get that. Like, I remember referring to the Cosby Show once, and they were like, I don't know if our readers, and I was like, our readers know about the Cosbys. Like, if our readers don't know about the Cosbys, they're like brain dead or actually dead. You know, like, I can't write for people who don't know who the Cosbys are. I can't. I mean, unless you're just too young. But our readers were not too young. So I needed a place where I could just tell a joke. And if I heard that voice in my head, I was like, nope, I'm keeping it in. And so I just wrote the whole novel that way, not really believing it would get published. That was not the goal. And it took me many years because it wasn't the goal. Because the thing about taking time to write a novel, if you're not a published novelist, is it's kind of like saying, I will be on all weekend scrapbooking, or please watch the kids while I knit. Like, it feels very self-indulgent. So it took a really long time, and it was just this thing I was doing for myself. But then so it was my husband. This is the long answer. My husband is the person who said, you have already written this book. You should try to get it published. And I said, it's enough. It's enough to know that I've written it. Because I was afraid of rejection. It was like, it's not quite enough. You should really try. So he's the one. He's the person who thought I could do it.
Yeah. Well, I love your jokes, so.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah. It meant so much to me. Jodi Picoult blurbed attachments. And her blurb is like, laugh out loud funny. And I was just wanted to like send a copy to all those editors. Like, I've made Jodi Picoult laugh. You're the last one, make it good. I like your shirt.
Oh, thank you. These are questions that were given to me by a friend of mine who couldn't come tonight.
Oh, wow, you're a good friend. Okay.
Yes, and she's actually the one who introduced me to Eleanor Park. So
she's a good friend.
She is the good friend.
Okay.
She's a good friend. And so her question, she had 2, but I know I don't want to take up more time than I have, but her question, one of them was, if you were to, score your book, which you will be in the movie.
Yeah.
What would be the song that you would have playing when Park is driving Eleanor to her aunt's?
Oh, okay. Well, so what song would I play while Eleanor and Park are driving? Well, if you go to my website, I have done playlists for the whole book.
I'm so sorry.
No. That was not. I wasn't shaming you. There's almost no other reason to go to my website, frankly. I don't feel like you should ever go there. But this once you could go there. And I've done like a director's cut, basically, where I go through and I say, this is the song I listened to when I was writing this. So the song that I listened to when I was writing that scene, this is a very cliched song. It's The Cave by Mumford & Sons. So it's like, it's empty in the valley of your heart. That song, da-da-da-da-da-da. Right? Is that right? Yeah. Because he's like, and I will hold on hope. Like, it's like sort of this like hopeful but sort of twisted. And then the other song that I listen to is Friendly Fire's Kiss of Life. Do you know that song? You should listen to it. It's Kiss of Life. Because he's like, it's this song that sort of builds, and it's somebody's feelings. They're getting bigger, and he's like, the sun, the stars, it gets bigger and more ecstatic. Because I felt like that drive is more about Park, I think, than Eleanor. It's about what Park's doing. So, what's the other one? Let's hear it.
Okay.
Lay it on us.
And I agreed with her. It was like Park's parents, like so much love, affection. Was that just like in contrast, or is that like a representation of like what you see them becoming, but like of like the most loving and stable relationship?
Yeah.
And it almost made me feel uncomfortable reading it. As like, you know, watching your parents make out is not somebody I don't think anybody wants to see.
Right. You know, I mean, that is not the relation. That's not what I had growing up.
Yeah.
You know, my parental situation was much similar to Eleanor's. You know, not really having loving parents, but I can remember friends who had loving parents, and I remember feeling like they were specimens in a zoo almost. You know, like, wow, loving parents? Where did you find them? So it's definitely, so okay, what I really wanted to accomplish there is Park believes in love. And I wanted Park to believe in love. I wanted him to be sort of idealistic about love. And to believe in love, you have to see love. So he believes in love because he lives with it. He sees two people who love each other and who commit to each other every single day. I mean, I don't think that Jamie and Mindy have had an easy path. But they have committed to each other, and they've committed to staying in love with each other. And he sees that having parents who love each other sets him apart from all of the dysfunctionality around him. So, I mean, what I always thought is this is a story about two kids, one of whom believes in love and one of whom doesn't. And that's the central clash. So yeah, I knew that I wanted these two loving parents. But then I fell in love with those parents as I was writing them. And when I was revising, one of the only things I had to change in the book is I had to go back and add more scenes at Eleanor. I'm ignoring you, I feel like.
No,
okay.
I'm listening.
I had to go back and add more scenes at Eleanor's house because when I first started writing, Park's family wasn't supposed to be that much of the story. But in the process of writing, I would be so depressed at Eleanor's house that I would move the action, and I'd be like, there's love and popsicles at Park's house, and they've got MTV and air conditioning. Let's go. So I kept moving the story over there, and then I really fell in love with them. And I mean, some of my favorite scenes are the makeover scene. I love, that scene really gets to me and got to me when I was writing it. And then the scene where Park's dad takes Eleanor, he encounters her in the driveway, and she thinks he's going to do something dreadful. And instead, he's just kind of reaching out to her. And it's an example that men are not bad. Because also in her life, there's not love and there are no good men. So I felt like that was a great moment for Eleanor to have a man reach out to her and be a good man. So I'm glad that your friend liked his parents, that you liked his parents. And thank you, because I loved spending time with his parents.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, all of you.